To moderate our panel and make the introductions is our own Chancellor of the University of Alaska Southeast, Dr. Richard Caulfield. Serves as the Chancellor of the University of Southeast, located in Juneau, Alaska, our capital city. UAS is a regional university which campuses in Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka, coastal community situated in Alaska's magnificent Tongass National Forest. As Chancellor, Caulfield provides strategic leadership in fulfilling UAS mission, including budget development, academic leadership in fulfilling UAS. You know, even I am suffering from, I keep reading the same line over and over again. Without further ado, I want to introduce Chancellor Caulfield.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's a real privilege for me to introduce our panel to bring an Alaskan perspective to the rich observations of Dr. Kettle. And so before I do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to our University of Alaska Southeast School of Management faculty, staff, and students who are here. We had a number of students who joined us today and will be with us here tomorrow as well. So thank you for all of your support in being here. I'm mindful of the time, so we'll move right into this. We're fortunate to have several speakers here. First of all, you've already been introduced to Dr. Dan White from the University of Alaska statewide system, our Vice President for Academic Affairs and Research. And it's a privilege to introduce Senator Mia Costello, who is a Republican from District K, serving in the legislature. She's a lifelong Alaskan, has lived in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau. She's a mother, a teacher, a public relations executive. She served on Governor Murkowski's staff. She earned her Bachelor of Arts at Harvard University, and I was very, very pleased to hear that she earned her Master of Arts of Teaching at the University of Alaska Southeast. Yes. She currently serves on a number of committees, including Labor and Commerce, which she chairs, the Resources Committee, Vice Chair, and Judiciary and the Regulatory Review Committees. So welcome to Senator Costello. And then also, we're pleased to have Anthony Malott, who is the president and CEO of Sea Alaska. Of course, a lifelong Alaskan. He is Eagle of the Tsegwedi clan and also Koyukon Caribou clan. He came to Sea Alaska in 2006, having spent 10 years with the Bank of America as a vice president, and was named CEO of Sea Alaska in 2014. He has a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Stanford. And so with that, what I'd like to do, in addition to inviting comments from Dr. Kettles, first and foremost, is to ask our speakers, I'm mindful of the principles that Dr. Kettle spoke about for upgrading competitiveness. Principles like there is no silver bullet. Many things matter. What matters most depends on what you already have. Every location is different. You can't change everything at once, even if it has to change eventually, and change requires action by many. So thinking about the application of those principles to Alaska, I wonder if we could ask our presenters here, and perhaps starting with Senator Costello, to speak a little bit about upgrading competitiveness in Alaska. What's your assessment currently of Alaska's competitiveness, and how do you think it can best be enhanced? Do you think cluster-based development provides an avenue for enhancing Alaska's competitiveness?
Thank you for the question. Is this on? So, thank you for the question. As I was listening to the presentation, I was thinking about parenting. You know, it's not over in a day, and it's certainly an investment, and it's going to take time, and you don't know if you're a success until years later. So I think one of the things I think that we can do better is collaboration, talking to each other, and having patience and knowing that if we can work together, there is some success that we can see at the end. The state, I think, has a spotty, if not sort of fractured approach to this topic. I think you can look around and point to a few different areas where we've done okay, but really overall we really need to be doing better. And I think that myself personally, economic development is my legislative focus, and I have, worked on that topic for a while. Alaska does have an oil and gas competitiveness review board, and I actually saw the presentation in advance, and after looking at it, I spoke to the colleague of mine who was instrumental in putting that in a bill that did pass, and I asked her, why don't we look at expanding that and possibly, changing it so that it includes other clusters? And so I think that, continuing to find out and ask where we can do a better job is something that we have a responsibility to do.
Great, thank you. I wonder if we could ask Anthony Malott to speak to that question about Alaska's competitiveness and.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this on? This is good? Okay. And I'll start with my introduction. Ganaku chet duasak chak na chet sati tagwedi ayachet kwashkakwan yadi ayachet koikan athabaskan Dutch chan ayachet. I do that. It's my traditional introduction, and if there's any Central Council employees here, you can tell President Peterson that I went ahead and did that. I do it often, and I didn't in a meeting I was with him, and he reminded me of that. It speaks to a reminder of the importance of our culture and language. And for this audience, and when I'm thinking about competitiveness, the Quashkekwan, they came down from Eyak territory at the end of the last mini ice age. They reached Yakutat, and the glacier was across the entire Yakutat Bay. Tsagwedi, last mini ice age, when there was a flood, or the perceived flood as the waters rose, went into the interior, and they came back to their traditional territories, however many hundreds of years ago. And my clan elder can tell me the name of the individual, the old lady that volunteered to go under the glacier to test to see if our clan could get back to Southeast Alaska. That history, that longevity, our understanding of place, our understanding of culture, our understanding of our land, our values is how See Alaska envisions creating greater competitiveness for Alaskan-based companies. And most of it's around how do we as Alaska Native corporations interact in the global economy. Values-based benefit corporation. We were the original benefit corporations. We exist to benefit a shareholder base. Every dollar we will ever make ends up as a benefit to our shareholders, dividends, scholarships, capacity building, jobs, etc. And we do it with a constant reminder of our history and our values and the strong set of responsibility and expectations, and it resonates in the global economy right now. That whole entire sense of sustainability and leading decision-making within a strong values-based framework, it makes it easier during times of difficulty to make tough decisions when you can go back and rely on a value set that you were taught that has history and resonance for thousands of years. I tell those stories from 600 years ago. They found an individual up in Klukwan, a pass, over 600 years old, and the Klukwan people remember his name. They carried that oral tradition of the one who was lost. And those are just recent stories when you think of the 10,000-year history we know we have in Southeast Alaska. So when I think of competitiveness, it's taking that history and that very rich history and utilizing it in a collaborative way, which I know we can't do it alone. We are a piece of the fabric. We as Native people, a piece of the fabric of the Alaska economy. But we are very willing and open to collaborate and making sure that there's economic resources for the state, but there's also traditional subsistence uses for the state. And we talked about how to measure prosperity and the ability to subsist and harvest our traditional foods to us is half of the measure of prosperity.
Thank you. Could we have Dan White, would you like to speak to that question about Alaska's competitiveness and the prospective role of cluster-based development and enhancing that?
Sure, well, is this on? Yeah, sounds like it is. Thank you for that, and I think in strategic planning, of course, we always think of three questions or three items. One is, what do we want to be? The second is, what are we now? And then the third is, how do we get from what we are to what we want to be? And the easy question is, what do we want to be? The hard question always, to me, is answering, what are we now? And I thought Dr. Kettles hit it right on the nose when he talked about understanding our assets. That's the what are we now, and what can we build on? And I actually think we have a lot of clusters that have been hiding in plain sight. I mean, I think the research and development cluster here in Southeast and focusing on the collection of research enterprises that are here between the Forest Service and NOAA and the University. University of Alaska has been spending roughly or receiving federal funds of roughly $120 million a year. And there are great clusters around geoscience. We're the best in the world at remote sensing, and we do that because of our location. We don't have the luxury of roads everywhere, and so Alaska, by its nature, has developed a remote sensing expertise that's above many other universities and federal organizations, but we haven't been able to develop that. And I think as we look at these assets, as Dr. Kettles pointed out, these clusters will come, and it's a matter of providing the pathway for those at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that theme, to Dr. Kettles, I know you spoke about the difference between relatively low-impact cluster activity and systemic clusters. And in light of what you've learned being here in Alaska and some of the conversations you've had, you offered some advice about how to move from low-impact clusters to more systemic. Is there anything you'd like to add on that, or advice that you could give us about how to increase the effectiveness of the cluster-based development here in Alaska?
Yeah, I would just say, I am very encouraged by what I hear about the opportunities that exist. And, I think they will grow over time, but the question is really, how can we coordinate our activities more? And I think it's asked a lot of kind of the volunteer cluster organizations at the moment to kind of play that role. What you need to think about is, how do you build that into the political process? How do you make them maybe part of the diagnostics that exists, and link that to what other economic development agencies do. So my sense is, I'm more optimistic from what I've heard here that there are actually a lot of assets and activities going on, but they might not be integrated enough yet to really have strategic plans. And I think that requires also initiative from the state government to say, yes, that's a direction we want to see. We don't know the answer, but we can provide the structures in which this can emerge.
Thank you. And to Senator Costello, you spoke about the Oil and Gas Competitiveness Council and the idea that perhaps that idea ought to be expanded in some way. What do you see as the challenges to being able to expand that type of an approach here in the state of Alaska, especially in a really dynamic budget environment that we're in today?
Thank you for that. I think it's really just how you approach what I call challenges. And I can't help but think of this concept of Toynbee's adversity theory, that civilizations that have challenges are the ones that are successful, because I think as Alaskans we have it's in our nature to rise to the challenge. And so I think that just today I took back an idea to my colleagues. I think in government oftentimes we are the one in the room that everyone says you need to just stay out of the way. But I think that we have an opportunity in government to bring people together, and I think that we need to change the paradigm so that it's not, the capital is up the hill and the university's down the road, and you have other organizations and businesses meeting. I think we need more opportunities like this. And I really want to thank the Juneau Economic Development Council, Brian, for this, and then also for the LEGO Robotics club that my son is involved in, but, you know, I think, I think just this today or tonight helps because, the government workers, we need to get out of our offices and reach out and meet everyone where they are, and if that's down the street or at a networking opportunity, then so be it. So I think that changing the paradigm of what government is and being more involved and speaking to each other and breaking down those silos. And oftentimes that's not that easy, even within government. Just yesterday I said, I'm going to introduce a bill that combines the Department of Labor with the Department of Education because we have one department doing one thing, and then once kids graduate from school, then they need jobs, and we have another department working on that. And I think breaking down those silos is very important.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. So Dan White mentioned one area that he thinks we already have arguably some real expertise in state remote sensing. I know there's been a lot of interest in the use of unmanned aircraft and so forth. What other possible cluster areas statewide do you see on the horizon looking 5 and 10 years out? Dan, do you have any others, or Anthony, that you'd like to share perspectives on that?
No, I want to hear you because we were looking at remote sensing as well, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, certainly remote sensing, and just as an example, the University of Alaska has the largest fleet of unmanned aircraft in the country. No other university has an unmanned aircraft fleet like we do, and so that's we also are the lead in this FAA's test site, and so this is a place where companies are starting to come. Alaska to look at applications for unmanned aircraft. Renewable energy, it's one of JEDC's clusters. It's an area that across the university system, we think we can make a big difference in energy for Alaska and energy for the rest of the world that shares the same kinds of energy problems that we do. That is very small grids that are very dependent on a single source of power. And as we develop those for our purposes, they have a global market because there's a lot of areas of Africa and a lot of areas of China, for example, that have very similar problems. Interestingly, the work that's being done at the university on very small grids, Boeing and other companies that have airplanes. An airplane is a very small grid. They have the same kinds of balancing problems that we're solving for our communities. And then another area is just the broader area of Arctic research. If you ask the question of how do you measure the importance of research, and one is publications and another is the number of times those publications have been cited, that is how many times people are reading them. The University of Alaska ranks the first in the world compared to any other university or government agency, more than NOAA, NCAR, all these organizations. The University of Alaska ranks number one. So as we look at that and how do we take advantage of that as the rest of the country is looking to the Arctic, I think Dr. Kettles mentioned location in one of the very first slides, and location. So how can we take advantage of that? Thank you.
All of those are some of the areas that See Alaska is looking into. I'm taking kind of the big statewide picture and putting it into our perspective and how some of the ANCs look at the world. Again, I go back to understanding our inheritance. What were we left? And natural resources was a significant piece of it, the value-based structure, the culture. We've chosen to be in industries that are relevant to us, that can create kind of a meaningful affinity for our shareholder base and our board, because lack of commitment to industry and operations has got us in trouble in the past. So keeping it very simple, environmental services, water-based services, environmental monitoring, remote monitoring, just because of its tie-in to our ability of commercial fishing. We have shareholders that know how to be out on the ocean. They know how to stay out and operate in tough conditions. How do we make sure that we utilize that strength? And remote sensing and remote data monitoring, especially as the scientific need to get more baseline data across the state for fisheries, for mineral development, for the opening of the Arctic, for climate change. It's so immense, this need for better baseline data. You know, we see that as an opportunity, as a specific business opportunity, but it's also an opportunity for the state to show that we have world-class management of all our resources. And I think that's going to be a key to self-certify the only global sustainable fishery, to self-certify kind of some of our forestry practices that we have. You know, that ability to show sustainability and know that we have the science and the expertise in state, I think is going to be valuable, and utilizing that and being open to finding the relationships that can move those opportunities forward is going to be key.
Thank you. And to Dr. Kettles, you referenced climate change as an area that might have some possibilities for Alaska in terms of innovative cluster-based development or innovation, generally speaking. Can you offer any specifics about your thoughts about how climate change may open doors for additional innovation here and competitiveness globally here in Alaska?
So really much in line of what we heard from the two previous speakers, I think that there's a lot of knowledge here because the environment in Alaska is clearly changing. And so, you know, you firsthand experience what that means, how you measure that, how that is affecting everything from mining to oil and gas to transportation. So I think there are areas here in which this is kind of the frontier of where things are happening, and I think where you can create knowledge. I would say, you know, I think the question then becomes, you know, how do we move from both heritage and the knowledge that is created to businesses? And that's non-trivial. And partly because my sense is, you know, we don't have a big community of kind of firms that exist here that can easily take this on, because this is risky. You know, these are industries that don't really exist. And so I think there's a lot of thinking required to how do we build the right kind of partnerships, maybe with some local companies that can move into these fields, but maybe also with companies from elsewhere that might say, oh yes, you know, Alaska is actually the place where I want to put my global R&D headquarter or you know, business unit headquarter in this particular area to really explore the economic potential of some of these ideas and knowledge that's coming out of it.
Mm-hmm. So Dan, you referenced Boeing having an interest in some of the innovation taking place here in Alaska. Are there other examples that you can point to of collaboration between larger firms nationally or internationally coming to Alaska and being able to tap into some of the innovations, small that they may be, at an early stage that they may be, but nevertheless finding some real benefits and prospects on the horizon for technological development?
Well, certainly, as I mentioned, unmanned aircraft, and we have both startup companies, two startup companies in Fairbanks, and then there's also companies that are coming in, and there are some big players in aerospace that are looking down at UAVs as a niche market for them. So certainly we see that as having a lot of potential. You know, one of the interesting things, and to Dr. Kettle's point, there are not a lot of businesses, and that was that businesses in the community that are ready to kind of take technologies and make them into something. And so that was kind of a shift that we had in the university, was away from the idea of let's just get this product and license it, because there wasn't a recipient to license that, and how do we help create a startup that can actually take the product and make money with it. And one of the examples, and I mentioned geoscience as an area where the university has a lot of expertise. And of course, we have scientists who are experts in volcanic ash modeling, because we have lots of volcanoes and it disrupts our air traffic. The group developed a volcanic ash model that would allow airplane companies to decide where they could and couldn't fly. And if they have better information, of course, they will not fly in certain areas, but allows them to continue commerce in other areas. And so they started up a company. It's called ViaDapt, and they have international clients now who around the Pacific Rim are looking to this little company in Fairbanks to give them information when there are volcanic eruptions anywhere in the world on how that's going to interrupt their business traffic. And so, those kinds of companies, and then there are, we would expect that just the geoscience can then be applied to other things, and will continue to grow that sector. But I think it's all tied back then to the work being done in the university and what more can feed into that industry. Thank you.
Very important example. I remember having a student who was aboard, I think it was a KLM flight into Anchorage that ran into an ash cloud in the dark, and thankfully they were able to get the engine started after a while, but not before they went down some 12,000 feet, I think it was. So I can see why that industry would be really important to develop. Yeah.
All 4 engines quit in that case.
Yeah. I want to give a quick opportunity for anyone in the audience who has a question. We have a microphone here if you'd like to come up and use that. Bob, would you like to come up to the mic, please?
I just can't wait for this because then it'll be almost time to go home. But thanks for being here. I have a question about a subject that I am very personally excited about, and that's citizen science. And I'm going to take off on a comment that Mr. Malat made about the traditions and the ability of our local native peoples to get out and help collect the information and the science that they've lived with for thousands of years. And I want to ask Dr. Kettle this: do you think there is a economic development cluster reason to connect that kind of citizen science with institutions such as UAS and our local federal agencies, where we can bring information in under their protocol and make it available through the institutions for research and development? I guess I'm believing that's an opportunity, but I'd like to have a take on that from anyone.
I think it's already being utilized. I think when you think of the Arctic Economic Council and the science going on in the Arctic to assess development and economic viability, they are utilizing traditional knowledge to make some of those assessments. The climate change, they're utilizing traditional knowledge and tying it into how they measure and where they look for their data set. So I think it's happening, and I hope you see more of it.
Okay, and just a follow-up, Rick, does that seem like something that could connect with UAS, for example, and graduate students that are involved in projects, and connect with people in the community that have the ability to get out and under strict protocol can return that information to either your students or your staff for future development or research?
I would say absolutely, and it's these types of forums that gives us the opportunity to really begin those conversations and go to work and making them a reality. So I thank you, Bob, for bringing up that question. Is there anyone else who has a question from the audience? Yes, please. Come up to the mic if you would, and then maybe, Bill, if you want to come up to the mic as well in the interest of time.
Thank you. Expanding on that remote capability and expertise that you already have, I understand that there is a lack in the market for remote sensing of earthquakes in anywhere in the world. So are you planning to expand on that and, most important, monetize it?
If I can address that. Yeah, the National Science Foundation actually, if you look at a map of Alaska, Alaska has more earthquakes than any other state and fewer earthquake monitors than any other state. So National Science Foundation is in the process of a major instrumentation outlay in Alaska. We're hoping that instrumentation outlay will stay put. National Science Foundation is committed to only keeping it for 5 years, and then they'll pull it out. But anyhow, that's a major new effort that I think is going to increase our capability. Now, commercializing that effort, I think I would go back to my earlier comments that earth science and geophysics is one of the strengths of the whole university system in Alaska. So it's clearly a place where innovation is an opportunity. Thank you.
Senator Costello?
I guess I would be a little remiss if I didn't mention an opportunity in the legislative process. On Thursday, the Alaska Innovation Act will have a hearing. It's my bill, Senate Bill 126, and when we talk about commercialization and access to capital, what this would allow, it would take the crowd investing model and bump it up to a crowd equity model so that individual investors would be able to provide up to $7,500 of their own funds to a business idea that could then collect up to $1 million. Because as we talk about all of the talent we have in Alaska, one of the things that we also talk about is access to capital, and that was something that you had brought up earlier. So I did want to mention that. It hasn't gotten any coverage in the press and no co-sponsors or anybody interested yet because the title was Small Securities Offerings. So we are now changing it to the Alaska Innovation Act, hoping that, and you know, I think that this is a small piece that government can do and, you know, to help Alaskans who are innovators by nature bring their business ideas to market.
Great, thank you. Bill, we'll have one more from the audience here, and then we'll move to wrap up.
Dr. Kettles, as I listened to your rather encyclopedic presentation, a full semester in 1 hour, thank you very much, I'm struck by the absence of the base of understanding who we are. We must know who we are before we can build upon that using the protocol that you established. And by that I mean the first people of the state have a very strong sense of who they are and where they came from thousands of years ago, and they're desperately trying to maintain that. The rest of us represent a culture of being a government colony, a history of extractive resources. It's a marvelous place on which to practice our self-reliance and build a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, we have this overhead of being a government colony, essentially, which is a bit enervating. So that's what I mean by we need to know who we are before we can build upon it with the discipline that you offered to us. Thank you.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think that very much in line with your comments. And it's so what I didn't mention. There's a lot of research that also shows that social capital is a key driver of whether or not regions succeed. And social capital has many connotations, but I think part of that is that there is a sense of belonging to some group, because that enables collaboration to have. To take place. And I think what needs to happen then is to take this very strong sense of I am here by choice, there's a long history here, and then see how I can draw on that as I think about the economic opportunities as they are in the future. This is not going to guarantee success, but I think it can make it easier for people to connect and maybe see the long term and see we're building something over time. So that's an important part of it, absolutely.
So just to wrap up here, one final question for each of our Alaskan commentators. Thinking about the next 1 to 3 years and action steps that could be taken to enhance a climate of entrepreneurship and innovation in Alaska, what recommendations would you have for JEDC and for state government and others thinking about how to support that culture of entrepreneurship? And if we could start with Anthony.
I think, keep on doing what they're doing. I love coming to the conference the last 2 years because it's got a different feel. There's actual, Beth mentioned it, just the energy you feel from the conference. The collaboration with our group, Ha-Ani. See Alaska started Ha-Ani because we were off running operations and local collaboration wasn't occurring. Ha'ani was the economic driver, the economic development entity that was going to take, all our wants to have presence and to have meaningful relationships in Southeast. And they're working side by side, JEDC. They're kickstarting business plan competitions. It's just kind of a nascent, growing entrepreneurial culture right now. It needs much more fostering, and it needs some sustainability from this group, from government, from other areas, because we really do believe in the job-by-job economic development. Because when you're from a community of 800 for Huna down to a community of 400 Cake, a single job, 5 jobs, 10 jobs, those are very meaningful. So the entrepreneurial spirit, growing that and doing the building block job-by-job economic development will be key.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. I would just repeat what I said in my earlier remarks. 10 years ago, if we looked at the university, there was very little commercial opportunity coming out into the private sector. Now there are dozens of opportunities, and I think, be a part, be an investor, or help build this business ecosystem that can receive these, be the entrepreneur that takes one of these kind of new companies and puts the business sense into it, the knowledge of how to make money with a company. So as I think Dr. Kettles mentioned, it takes everyone, and it takes some time. Thank you.
Senator Cassell?
Thank you, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I think from a government perspective, we need to be listening more, and we need to provide opportunities to listen to the communities in Alaska and find out what is needed and how government can best facilitate moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here, staying late into the evening. Let's give a round of applause for all of our commentators and Dr. Kettles.